There's a lot of content here on YouTube for beginner pianists, and there's also a staggering amount of content for highly advanced pianists, but there's relatively little that covers the intermediate levels. So today I'm going to share with you my list of 7 things that separate the intermediate pianist from the beginner, and guess what? None of them have anything to do with rep. Number 1, keys and key signatures are each their own language. Beginners read keys and accidentals as just that. They're basically symbols on a page. Maybe they know that there's at least one corresponding scale for a particular key, but that's usually where the knowledge stops. But an intermediate pianist begins to learn that each individual key actually feels a certain way to play at the keyboard. How it feels to play in C is going to be different than how it feels to play in B, right? And it's going to be different for playing in G flat as well, right? Same goes for all of the minor keys. Now, you might only begin to feel these differences in a few keys as an early intermediate player. But by late intermediate, we should be close to having a physiological understanding of nearly all 12 major keys and all 12 minor keys. No longer are key signatures just a symbol. No longer are accidentals symbols that tell us merely sharps and flats, but they intrinsically give us information about how it's going to physically feel to play the piece in question. Number 2, consistent and reliable hands together movement. I'll say this is especially true of the aspects of practice that are regularly recurring. So, things like scales, arpeggios, rep that you've worked on for quite a while. Now, a beginner is going to tend to lose control of one or both hands while working through recurring practice techniques. So what might happen is if we're working on a scale, one hand will get in front of the other one, or we'll miss a finger cross, right? Something strange will happen. Now, when you've gained that subconscious muscle control so that we don't have to think about it anymore, that allows the hands to continue to play. I can continue to have a conversation with you, for example, right, while I play a scale. When we've gained that automatic ability, we can safely say that we've moved from beginner to intermediate. Number 3, an internalization of basic technique. This one kind of goes with number 2 in that in order for the hands to play seamlessly together, we also need to have pre-programmed bits of technique in our minds and in our bodies. In particular, if we can perform standard finger crosses like thumb under 3 or thumb under 4 and vice versa, crosses over the thumb, not just in scales, but also things in arpeggios and similar things that you'll find in repertoire, right? Those are just some great examples of very basic, fundamental techniques that we need to understand. And if we can play those, and we can play those automatically, then we are transversing that gap from beginner to intermediate. Now I'll add that by late intermediate, we should have a sense of fluidity in the wrist and in the arm, and it should be automatic, and attention won't need to be brought to it. Now that begins with techniques that are as simple as just making wrist circles and playing. So letting the wrist be fluid and move around, right? But it culminates for the intermediate player with simply never having static arms and wrists during the playing process. So our attack, our release, legato, staccato, accents, subito piano dynamics, all played through fluid motion where we never get rigid, we never get tense, we never start to hold our hands here, only here, but instead we're consistently and constantly moving the hands, the wrists, the arms. Everything is free to move about the keyboard. Number 4, ear recognition. One of the biggest signs of a beginner is the complete disconnect between the ears and the hands. The hands move, but the ear may or may not be sure of what the hands are doing. As an intermediate player, you should be able to definitely distinguish between major and minor chord quality, right? Also major and minor scale quality. Right, and do that by ear. But by late intermediate, we can add ear recognition of diminished chords, augmented chords. Yeah. But ear recognition isn't just limited to quality of chord or quality of scale. It's also tied to our ability to audiate music. So as an intermediate player, can you sing back a passage or a phrase after hearing it once or maybe twice? Can you play back a simple melody after only hearing it and being given the first pitch? Here's a quick test for you. I'm going to start with the D above middle C. I'm going to play this for you once. See if you can play it back yourself on your own keyboard at home. Here's a simple melody. Go ahead and give that a shot. Before we move on to number 5, let's hear from today's sponsor, me. If you want to continue to level up your abilities at the piano, I have an ever-growing library of super in-depth courses on my Thinkific page. Over there you can find deep dives into specific repertoire, including introductions of technical and musical practice that you'll be hard-pressed to find anywhere else online. There's even a course on audio production if you want to learn how to make better recordings of all that repertoire that you're working on. Plus, every course has a completely free preview that you can try out before you buy. I'm always adding new courses, so be sure and check out the link down below in the description to learn more. All right, back to the video. Number 5, theory knowledge of fundamental chords. If our previous example was all based on ear training and not sight, then this example is similar, but it's mostly on paper, right? So an early intermediate pianist should know some basic Roman numerals in music, the 1 chord, the 4 chord, the 5, and the 5/7. They should know the corresponding notation for such chords, and a handful of keys like C, G, D, E, A, F, potentially B flat. Now the late intermediate player should know these 3 fundamental chords in all 12 major and all 12 minor keys and be able to notate them on staff paper and be able to play them at the keyboard when prompted. So here's a quick test. Can you play in any voicing the 1, the 4, the 5/7 chord, and then back to the 1 chord in the key of D? So we're going to go 1, 4, 5, 7, 1 in D. Here we go. Here's one example. Right? I could start in a different voicing, so I could start here instead. 1, 4, 5, 7, back to 1. Okay, what about the same progression in the key of E flat minor? So this would be a test for a later intermediate player. The 1 chord, the 4 chord, 5/7, back to the 1 chord. Can you come up with a variety of voicings yourself? Can you play it through once? Can you find those? Test yourself with those keys and other keys. Remember, all 12 major keys, all 12 minor keys. Number 6, an understanding of at least 3 dynamic levels. So here I'm thinking a basic understanding of forte, piano, and mezzo forte or mezzo piano, one of the middle dynamics, okay? But not only can we hear them and distinguish them as different dynamic levels, but in your playing, you can easily navigate changing dynamics through these 3 steps. Can you perform a very linear crescendo from piano to forte without any hiccups or dynamic valleys, just using a scale again? We could think of each note as just a little bit louder than the previous, just a little bit louder, and the same degree of loudness increasing across our scale. We can use a scale to practice that, of course. We could also use repertoire to practice that, or any other exercise. But when we're prompted with a crescendo or a decrescendo, can we make it as linear as possible? Can you play subito forte and subito piano? So let's say we're playing some big chords, forte, and then we need to play subito piano and subito forte. Can we go back and forth between those large dynamic changes and do them with great control? Most importantly, as you play a phrase, does your ear lead you to create the appropriate dynamic changes with the hands? If you can answer yes to at least a few of these questions, you are an intermediate player. If you can answer yes to all of the questions, then you're at least a late intermediate player or beyond. Last but not least, number 7, the ability to catch mistakes when they happen during practice. Now, I'm not only talking about pitch mistakes. Hearing a wrong pitch when it's played, that's definitely a beginner skill. But taking mistake recognition to the next level, we want to hear incorrect pitch and incorrect rhythm and incorrect dynamic. When you're practicing, do you realize if you have paused for a technical issue? Do you realize if you have rushed through a passage? Do you realize if you've accidentally changed that dotted eighth note syncopated rhythm to a triplet instead? And can you make all of these realizations at home during practice and not with the aid of a teacher? This type of mistake recognition, this is one of the pinnacles of linking the ears and the hands together. And at the highest levels, the ear internally hears the music that it would like the hands to create at the piano, and then the hands are asked to follow. So we can begin to climb that musical mountain by first training our ears well enough to tell our hands when they have not worked correctly after they play. So there's my list of 7 things that set the intermediate pianist apart from the beginner. Where are you in your study? Which of these items can you already do? And what causes you the most trouble? Let us know in the comments down below. Since many of the things we just talked about relate to ear training, here is a great video to check out and hone your listening skills even further. I'm Szczepanek, and you've been watching Pianist Academy. I'll see you in the next video.